Hi, Razvan. Glad to have you here. Managed to steal you for half an hour from this year's hackathon. And hopefully, we have a good subject to talk about, the role of CTO in today's software organization, basically. Just for the people that don't know us, my name is Remus Pereni. I'm a software architect and CTO of Yonder. Been working with some incarnation of Yonder since 1996, mostly on technical tracks. And I'm honored to be here with Razvan. Razvan, can you say a couple of words about yourself?
I'm Chief Solutions Architect in Yonder. I've been here for 12 years. And my role is to make sure that the technology, the project that we are delivering to our customers are aligned with the customer's needs and are on budget and the right quality.
Okay. Well, you're definitely modest. So, good question. Why do we talk about CTOs? Do you think is important to discuss about CTOs? Do you think it's a need for a CTO? How do we define the role of a CTO, basically?
Right. Of course, at this moment, there might be different types of CPOs, and it mostly depends on the type of the company that they are working on. If it's a startup, maybe the role of the CTO is totally different than an already mature or maybe an enterprise company, right? If it's a product company, again, it can be totally different than the role of an outsourcing company. It totally depends. So I don't have enough experience. I've never been a CTO of a product company. However, I've seen so many companies, and I've interacted with so many CTOs that I somehow detected some of the capabilities that the CTO should have, right?
And I guess the other way around, it's also true in the sense that you've seen many companies that did not have the role of CTO.
That's also true. Especially if the company is quite small, it's not a dedicated CTO. Yeah. Even though there might be some persons, maybe the software architect or maybe the engineering manager who is also playing the role of the CTO of that company.
But one question, why isn't enough to have just an R&D manager or VP of engineering? Why do you need somebody else in this role? Because I would imagine, in essence, you could have one people playing all these roles in an organization.
Well, I think it's mostly related to the focus, right? It's one thing to have focus both for the business, from the process, but also the technology, and one thing to look at mostly on the technology, of course, take into consideration the entire business context, right? So that's one thing, and it's usually whenever you're playing the role, multiple roles, you're somehow in a conflict because it really depends on. Also, you're gonna go with the business, and you're not gonna be so aligned with the technical strategy.
This is exactly also my experience in the sense that most of the time an R&D manager or VP of engineering is focused on the financial aspect of building a product, which is of course very important, but sometimes it hides some of the complexities and the decisions that affect the product itself. Or affects the basically trade-offs that have been made in the product, because I think the trade-offs are between the important parts of an architectural technology-related discussion in the product. Unfortunately, you cannot have.
You cannot, because especially if you're an engineering manager, you're most likely be very focused on the business, and you're gonna lose the track of what's happening in the technology. And the role of the CTO is to actually make sure that the technology will be an enabler for the business needs, not only now but also in 5 years. So if you're not really active into looking what's coming on the technology track, basically you might have some problems in the future.
And that's why we are talking about the difference between maybe a starting company like a startup that has a different set of goals, like growing fast, like proving a point, which requires a set of trade-offs, as opposed to maybe an already established company that has been investing in developing a product for the past 10 or 20 years. I mean, we are talking about complexity and value, but just maybe to reference, the complexity of the software product that has been developed for 10, 20 years is similar to maybe of an airplane. So you want to kind of make sure that whatever decisions you're going to make from an engineering perspective, from a technology perspective, in the context of an airplane, it's not going to kind of affect or impact the 10, 20 years of investment into it.
When you're a startup and you're at the beginning, you don't have anything to migrate or and drag with you, let's say. However, if you're already you have already the data, you have some applications, the users already know the application, how it works. It's quite hard to have major changes to the system from the functional, but also technical.
And just to speak about the dangers, for instance, because I think the big trouble with technology is that it's not entirely visible outside of the technical people. And most of the times, unfortunately, technical people has a little bit of a trouble expressing the complexities or the challenges in such a way that non-technical people basically are able to understand. So just speaking about what type of dangers are we talking about, I know, for instance, we have seen situations in which developers are definitely trigger happy and they like to play with the new technologies and just add new technologies to a product without necessarily adding value, but adding complexity with this. But there are other dangers as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. So as I said, if the CTO will try to please the developers, they will allow them, okay, there's a new tool, let's add it, right? So even though that particular tool, it's not bringing any kind of value to the technical vision that he already has. On the other hand, the CTO can be something like a business pleaser, if I could say like that. So they don't actually have a real technical vision, but how they try to please the business or the manager.
Make the wrong trade-offs, basically.
Right. And he should somehow try to draw some lines, like, hey, we should not do that.
In this particular case, basically, we are talking about ignoring necessary maintenance, necessary updates, necessary maybe transitions to different technologies for the sake of cutting costs, without maybe transmitting the right feedback to management of the impact of that so basically, in transmitting the feedback, ignoring and transmitting the right feedback to management about or to the leadership team, what was the actual trade-off?
Exactly, and what are the risks?
The risk in there, And that's how you end up with, for instance, the big discussions about the big rewrites, because all the small decisions that could have been solved with a little bit of focus on the technology side at the right time, that were ignored, turned into a technology debt that requires quite a heavy investment to correct the path in there. But one question, what would be the skills basically of a good CTO from this perspective? Why not just take or pick any of the developers from the development team and just assign him the role of CTO? What do you think are the key characteristics of a good CTO?
Yeah, I've seen so many times CTOs that worked on in that particular company. Maybe they started like junior developers, and then after 7-8 years, they actually became the CTO of that company. So that's quite logical, I would say, because you just have the right context for that industry, for that product, and you can basically have the good context of what is the technology stack and things like that. So basically you have the depth, if I could say. However, you don't have enough experience in terms of breadth, right? So that's why it's going to be quite hard for you to know what's outside of your business context.
Right.
So basically, it might be really good if you somehow have maybe a group of consultants, or maybe have some partners that you can connect with and validate some of your ideas, or even more, they can somehow from time to time come to assist you and maybe collaborate with you to prepare a technical strategy further.
So basically, it can be that the developers, although very good developers, basically because they were set in the same context for 10 or 20 years, they're basically in their own bubble of technology.
Exactly, right.
There is a small difference between the hype and the marketing around the new set of technology and the real practice and implementation and the feeling of playing with that technology. And by not having always the experience in that field. So in one way, you need both depth and breadth.
Yeah, it's like the T-shape, right? So you have to have both. However, if you somehow became a CTO within that company, one strategy will be to somehow bring partners to work with and prepare the technical strategy for the future.
And can be just any partner, or do you see any specific? I mean, we discussed about needing to be familiar with the context of the product, because again, you cannot just have a technology vision or a strategy vision that's generic and can be applied to all the companies. You need to have a vision that's basically specific to that particular company, right?
Right. So I think it would be really nice to maybe find some outsourcing company, because they the technical people from that, they have worked with all kinds of technologies, all kinds of industries, so they have that breadth horizon, let's say, so they have good understanding of what technology, what are the trends, where things are going, so you can somehow collaborate with them. They don't have your full industry, however, you should be having that one.
So then what's the difference between hiring an architect, for instance, or hiring a CTO? Because I guess an architect would also be able to have the experience and be able to assist you with certain technology decisions, basically.
So I think there are two things. One of them is the difference between a consultancy, and the other one is to have something like CTO as a service. I feel that one is more like reactive and the other is more active. When you go and say, okay, just give me consultancy about the cloud migration or authentication mechanism or things like that, basically you're bringing in some of the people for a couple of hours, and but they don't have the full context. So they can discuss in general how things are going, but they cannot be somehow mapped based on your needs, right? But if you go with something like a CTO as a service, which is more like people that can be that can work together with you continuously, not full time, of course, but can work together with you, and they have already some kind of insights about the processes. You're going to collaborate for a long time, so they don't have to be do this.
So in essence, the CTO has to be an intimate. So basically, they have to know your enterprise landscape. They have to know your processes, your customers. So they need to really understand, basically, not only your current state and technology, but also, I guess, your business strategy and vision for that, in essence.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be just one person. It can be maybe a group that has different skill set. So they basically have something like a committee, maybe, and you don't have to vote. But however, the CTO itself can somehow validate some of the decisions, some of the thoughts, and maybe some other guys can come in and say, "Hey, did you know that the particular technique is nowadays a trend? How can we adapt on that?" And
that's a valid point, because we have seen companies, of course, without CTOs, and we have seen companies with CTOs, and even the companies with CTOs will sometimes reach out for help or just a validation of idea.
Of course.
And I think this is an important aspect, the fact that you're talking to a professional service company, one that's running multiple projects all the time. They have the hands-on experience. Sometimes it's difficult to consolidate that hands-on experience into the head of one person. So that's why it's important to have organizations or groups like TechBoard, in which basically you have people with a lot of experience, a lot of depth, but maybe not enough breadth and not enough of your context, basically. But by tapping into the skills and knowledge of those people, you're able to have somebody that's understanding your context and someone that's understanding what kind of skills and experience could help you maybe get to the next level of your challenge or business challenge from that perspective.
Yeah, so related to your original question, I think another skill of the CTO should be to know their limits, right? So they don't have to know everything. However, if they feel that things are out of control, they can always ask help and go and talk with the experts on those areas, on those topics.
Right. And getting back to the original question, why would you need then a CTO? Basically, a CTO, it's a counterpart that should be accountable or responsible for the technology of the product, making sure that the product is still going to be there in 5 or 10 years and be healthy, regardless of the other part of the balance, which is the financial and operations part of the balance. And the reason you need somebody to counterbalance that is because basically you can have a lot of decisions that will impact the internal state or internal quality of your application that's not going to be entirely visible to the other stakeholders. So you need somebody to make sure that is the voice of the strategy and the product,
right,
to balance the voice of operations and finance.
It's always about trade-offs, right?
Okay, right. It's always about trade-offs. Speaking of the counterpart, basically a VP of engineering or R&D is focused on the operations side of things, on making sure that the costs stay under control and the value is always delivered. And the CTO should be the ones that it's making sure that the product, it's not making the wrong trade-offs and it's still going to be a good product on medium and long term, basically. So one's safeguarding the operations and efficiency of the product, and the other is safeguarding the strategy alignment of the product, so it can still be developed in the future. And I guess for this one, it should be part of the stakeholders. So that's why CTO, it's a C-level executive. It should be at the same table in essence, right?
Yeah.
How important do you think is that part?
Well, I think it's very important because as we said, if they don't have the business context, if they don't know what are the company objectives and what is the context, basically they cannot have the real non-functional requirements for the products that he's going to develop, right? And it doesn't have to be, maybe this is the biggest misunderstanding that I feel, that the CTO is the most technical person in the company, which is not quite true. First of all, it has multiple focuses, so they cannot be really hands-on on that part. But more than that, so they don't have the enough time, let's say, to write the code.
This is where actually the career path kind of are aligned, because that's why you need to go through senior developer, tech lead, architect.
Right.
Because you need to have the translation skills. So being part of the leadership team, you need to be able to translate the trade-offs that you're going to make on the product side in such a way that basically the rest of the management team is able to understand what kind of trade-offs are being made. Again, we are not talking about a paper airplane. We are talking about proper Airbus type of construct with a lot of engineering, where you have different people specialized on maybe the fuel system or maybe the safety system or the IT parts, which are basically architects and tech leads and so on. And you need a person that's able to explain the complexity and the challenges, and maybe some of the decisions, what's going to be the impact of those decisions in terms of safety and health of that airplane, basically.
So it's more like a translator between the business people and the technical people, because it's two ways, right?
And this is why it needs to be somebody that's able to grasp technology. That's why the depth and breadth of technology kind of matters, because he needs to understand a little bit from every part of the engineering of the airplane to be able to understand the trade-offs. Can we have products without trade-offs? Can we have decisions on the technology side without trade-offs?
I don't think so. Either it's about time.
So you're still looking for that as well?
There's no magic secret, no magic recipe for that.
So I know as a CTO, I've been helping companies with a couple of things. One was maybe in trying to surface some of this technical debt that has accumulated to the management team, just making them understand what is the state of internal quality of the product. Some projects were related to maybe having an validation of the product's technology strategy direction, just making sure there is a second opinion on whether the future development efforts are going in a direction that makes sense for the product and also makes sense from a perspective of their customers and where their vision is going to be. What is your experience as a CTO? So how did you help companies in this role?
So I have a lot of experience with different use cases. So for one of our customers, what we are doing is that I'm basically assisting the current CTO or the chief solutions architect from the customer side, and I'm mostly consulting, but also doing some research, maybe preparing some kind of a technical strategy for some parts of the system. And I'm also overlooking some of the applications, right? So I'm really we do a great team together, let's say. So that's one use case where I'm just assisting the current CTO. But on the other hand, there are other customers where, let's say, one example where they wanted to somehow move to cloud, and in this case, they needed some guys, some experienced guys who already did that in the past, right? So they know what to be prepared for. Does it worth it? What are the trade-offs? How much time it will take? What should look for, and things like that. Yeah. And it was really helpful for them. Right? So I had one where I'm involved basically every day. Yeah. However, there are some use cases when maybe we spend something like 2 months together and discover what are they need and somehow prepare a cloud migration roadmap, let's say.
So in the first case, I guess your role was more like a validator.
Exactly.
You were just a second opinion, able to make sure that whether those expensive decisions that are going to be made are actually a decision that, well, nobody can say anything about the future that's going to be future-proof, although that saying is used quite a lot. But at least there are less chances of being wrong or doing stupid errors.
Exactly.
Investing in an approach or in a direction that doesn't make sense.
And more than that, it was not just myself, because usually I don't have enough experience in some technologies or some techniques. So I always try to bring some other guys from Yonder who can assist me in order to...
So basically you were the one that knew the context of the company, you knew exactly the enterprise landscape, and you also knew what would be the right person to drag into the project.
Yeah. So also one of my roles was to somehow bring the right expert to discussion whenever it was needed.
Right. And in the second case, basically, it was the experience of Yonder in implementing many of those cloud migration projects that allowed a company to basically bootstrap their process and avoid that rework that's normally associated with a learning process, in which, of course, the first times you're going to make some mistakes. And in this particular case, especially talking about technology, some mistakes can be quite costly and have an impact on time, which also gets to cost.
Right, because every time you're reading about the cloud, most of the times you're reading only about the pros, but not also the cons or the things that might become some bottleneck for you, or things that you have to look up.
So, do you see the role of CTO in any company that's related to software, or is it maybe above a certain size or something like that?
Even though for a startup, I think most of the startup has something like a CTO role. So even though it's a small application, if it's a small company, like 5 people, 5 developers, you're still going to have one person who is going to play the role of the CTO, even though its title, it's not going to be CTO, right? Of course, that particular person will have a totally different focus, like maybe he or she will write code as well.
I guess it would be expected for a startup with 5 people,
Most probably you're gonna be like a firefighter in that small company. However, when you're a large company, definitely you need a CTO, definitely.
Or maybe when you're integrating different products, right? Because we see this, let's say, trend of buying and acquisition of products and companies. And I guess in this point, you need somebody across all the products, especially you want to have a strategy to integrate those products. Because I can imagine sometimes can be quite challenging to just get these weird products that were never designed to work together and to put them together in a way that makes sense.
Right. So I think, having this kind of acquisitions without a technical person with you, it's like, buying a car, but you've never driven a car. Right? So you don't know what to look for in this sense. Definitely you need a CTO on a large company, especially if you have acquisitions. Yeah.
And especially since some of the decisions are cross-cutting decision concerns, like changing all the products so they at least have some integration points, identity access management, usually the type of things that you need to sort across all the products to be able to talk about an integration of the product.
And also discover the limits of the product that you're buying, to at least be aware of what you're buying.
Okay. So how do you see like an engagement going on? I mean, is it something like I can just call Yonder and say, hey, I need a CTO? how long do you think you need to get yourself familiarized with the context of a customer or an enterprise landscape so you can understand and make the right decisions in there?
Right. Of course, the longer you stay with Yonder, the better, because more context. The context becomes more clear. However, we have something like an approach in order to do the discovery. So we have a phased approach where we go through a lot of topics. We spend some time. Most of the times, especially after COVID, because we can now visit the customer, or the customer can visit us. We can spend a week together and go through the business context, the functional context, and the technology, process, infrastructure. So we really understand what's going on, and we are actually going through. For example, the business context, we go and see, which are your competitors? What is your competitive advantage? We go through all those details, the pricing model, everything, and it's more like an accelerated way to get the context. Otherwise, you have to spend maybe more than 3 months, maybe full time, to really get the information.
But the idea is that once you're familiarized with an enterprise context of a company, you're basically staying there. So you will be the right person to discuss.
That will be, and usually this is how it works. Customers come to us with a specific need. We have the discovery phase, and we usually recommend some other actions, even though they want to solve.
So it's a stable relationship, in essence. You will always have the same kind of CTO to go to. You're always working with the same kind of companies because you know them, you know their context, know the challenges, and basically you're insider from their perspective.
I think because it's this discovery phase, and it's quite an investment for both parties, also for Yonder, but also for our customer, to provide that kind of information. And if you have the relation, the collaboration just for like 2 months, well, what's the point? It's a lot of investment, but it's not.
Well, thank you so much, Razvan.
Thank you very much.